UA, Key Learnings, 策略 Marken, Crafting Insights, Tribes, Weak Signals, Insights, Trends, Analysis, 品牌 Estrategias, 观点
Experience.
Vibrations by DinVibe. Why vibrations? Because our mission at DinVibe is to take the pulse, anticipate the shifts to come. Smart tech is our ally to identify where the next shakes will come from. Like anthropologists, our field of study is humans and the shifts in their behavior, with the aim of guiding brands towards innovations that will resonate and make sense. We are a passionate bunch. With this podcast, our desire is to share some of the insights we detect and introduce you to the women and men who are using them to impact their organizations at every level. Our ambition is to inspire you, give you some food for thought, and hopefully make you want to meet us. Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Vibrations by DinVibe. My name is Sandra and I'm your host on this podcast. This is our first and certainly not our last episode in English, and for this special occasion we're delighted to welcome Lucas Nanini, co-founder of the clean skincare brand for babies, NOLEO. We met Lucas a few years ago when he was working for Coty and had decided to partner with us on some social media intelligence projects. We stayed in touch as he left Coty to join his business partner Nico as they transitioned full-time to their entrepreneurial venture NOLEO. Lucas is a powerhouse, a true trailblazer in the field of innovation, and this conversation is filled with lessons from both his experience working in large corporations and also launching his own brand. We were joined by Audrey Laurent, research director at DinVibe, who was Lucas's business partner when he was a client of DinVibe's. In this discussion, Lucas shares insights and stories from his experience leading innovation in large corporations such as Procter & Gamble and Coty. Lucas talks about the key role proximity and agility play in innovation and explains how helpful it's been for him to speak several different business languages. We discuss the major shift from consumer-centricity to human-centricity and close the discussion on his brand NOLEO and how he and his co-founder prioritize engaging with customers directly to ensure they're always in sync. It was particularly exciting for us to have this discussion with him, considering how aligned we are with his views on human-centricity and innovation in particular. We hope you benefit as much from this conversation as we did, and be prepared to listen several times. This one's like a good Bordeaux wine. You really need to savor it. Enjoy! Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Vibrations by DinVibe. We're delighted to have our first episode in English with a wonderful guest today, Lucas Nanini. And so we'll start right away with an introduction. Can you tell us about yourself, Lucas?
So I'm Lucas. Some people would say I'm an entrepreneur turned entrepreneur. Some other people call me a chemist with a twist. Depends on how people know me. I've had a bit of an unusual path throughout my career. And one of the things I'm known for is I'm a no BS person. So I just want to make sure that everyone is ready on the podcast today because it may be something that will be a little bit different versus what you've seen before. So fasten your seatbelt and let's go. I studied in one of the grandes écoles in France, in Strasbourg, before going to Japan to finish my master. And then I basically got recruited by P&G. And my first job, actually, my first assignment, which is very interesting because it's hyper relevant today, I had the mission and the task to analyze the whole recycling process throughout Europe. As a first job, first internship, that was quite amazing. So I've done a lot of things at P&G with like all the big companies. You start from one point, you cross to another point. And I've been doing everything from very upstream to disrupt the market in fine fragrance to very downstream developing physical products and packaging for brands like Lacoste and Dolce & Gabbana, for example. I've always been in that sphere of innovation, and that's something that I've decided to push on very early on in my career. And the good thing is, at the time at P&G, it was a very consumer-centric organization. So you really had the possibility to make a change by listening to people and actually triggering, whatever innovation was relevant for that market, to that consumer. I worked mainly in Europe. I went to probably all the different innovation centers at P&G in Asia. So I did Beijing, China. I did Singapore for a year and a half. That was an amazing experience. But I also spent a good 6 months specifically in consumer insights in Japan as well for one of our largest brands. And then I came back to Europe and moved to France 2 years ago to take on what we call the stretch innovation team for Coty Luxury. And that's a model that is very, very different. So I'll be able to tell you more about that before I actually left the company. Not because I had any issue or any problem or I was bored or anything, but simply because in the meantime, I had started a small project with my good friend Nico to give clean product for his baby daughters. And that ended up being a fast-growing company. So I had to choose between staying in a big company, very well paid, very secured, to tiny company with no salary and no security. And I picked, of course, as you would have guessed, the latter. Because I have 24 hours a day and I don't have a kid or a wife, I do also many other things. So I'm collaborating with a company called the Good Face Project. It is a tech company in California founded by two super smart women. It's all about product and ingredients transparency. And it's not just for consumers, but it's also for brand. And the difference is, it's a bit like Yuka, if you like, but for businesses. And the difference is the background of those two ladies is tech. So you have a proper AI background as part of the activity. That's what I found super interesting. And when I see those type of projects, I tend to support them and have a couple of consulting activities on the side because I miss beauty a lot even today.
Lucas, I have a first question for you. The notion of consumer centricity seems to be the driving force of your career, something that you always try to push forward. Can you tell us how you implemented consumer centricity when you were working at P&G and Coty?
P&G is a bit the mecca of consumer insights. And again, I'm a bit biased. I'm sure many other companies are doing very well in that sense. If I look into all the consumer goods or even tech companies. At P&G, one of the key functions in R&D actually was what we call products research. And what products research was basically a combination of consumer insights and technology understanding. And the way it was basically, the mission was very simple. You had to translate consumers' unmet needs into winning products and services. And that was actually requiring specific skills because it was very difficult for consumers to articulate what their pain point and their intention was. So if you ask anyone what their pain point is, they'll tell you something, but actually that's not really what they mean because they're missing some of the pictures and the information of what's happening in other industries, what's actually possible from a technology point of view, et cetera, et cetera. And that translation element was hypercritical because a lot of the companies work on what we call a technological push. So you have a technology, but so what? What do you do with it? But on the other side, you had markets that had specific needs, but didn't really know how to enable that need and translate that need. So it was really cool within that company. But actually what was happening is P&G was doing, at the time, consumer-centric projects before a lot of the companies starting to merge into that a decade ago or so. And that's where it becomes very interesting. Now, big companies, if we look into consumer centrism and the way people work, big companies are great into two things. In my opinion, they're great for what we call line extensions. So, for example, you have a laundry product that is, lavender. You listen to the market and you bring a new variant called vanilla, for example. Or they're good for product line expansion. And by expansion, I mean, you launch in Singapore, China, Hong Kong, you know exactly how the market works. Then you listen to your consumers in France and in Germany and you adapt that proposition into the new market. Large companies are very good into that. But what, in my opinion, they're not very good at, things related to step changing a market, disrupting a market, etc. There's a lot of skills in these companies to conceptually work on those, but actually converting an idea into a winning project in the market. We've seen only very few doing that. And that's why the people that actually do that are the startup. So the structures that are much smaller, but also much closer to the consumers themselves. The way I did that throughout my career and how I evolved that into Coty was through a very successful assignment I had in Singapore, where one of our top brands, so SK2, was not doing very well in market for various, market, competition, distributor reasons in different countries, so Korea, Japan, China, etc. And what the team did was to put a few folks, it was about 8 of us, all collocated in the same space. So you had the designer, you had the mechanical expert, you had the marketing expert, you had trends expert, etc. And literally it was kind of a tiny family within a massive, big family with money and budget. And we basically had to find solutions for that. That way of working, that was pretty much like what you would see in some of those small startups where you had a direct contact with the consumers, a direct contact with the market. I was in charge of making the product and manufacturing it. And I literally picked a supplier that was down the road from where I used to live in Singapore, because I didn't want to travel to another country to check the factory. I wanted to take, a 25 minutes taxi ride to go and talk to my supplier. And that massive proximity and massive agility was something that actually was working well, to the point that we managed to have this specific product launch on a magnetic applicator at the time that we launched in less than 9 months, fully qualified, clinicals, product development, manufacturing, launched into the countries. And it was probably one of the fastest projects that we launched. The biggest problem that we had was that at the back of it, top management wanted to have all the projects work with this model. We wanted to make an exceptions and really save part of our business, and actually started to become a request. And what I did when I came back to Europe was actually to pitch that format to my management at the time. The analogy I give is the A team. So in French, we call it l'agence touriste, where you have not an integrated team, not an detached team, but a hybrid team where we were about 6 or 7 people, each with a specific skill. So you have a head of trends, a head of digital strategy, a head of design, a head of manufacturing, a head of insights. And we could speak both language. First, the startup language, or the consumer language, or the market language. Hyper agile, I was recruiting people from agencies, for example, as opposed to within the companies. But we could also speak the corporate language, because that's hyper important in that sense, to understand what the priorities of the business are, but also how to influence your management to make sure that project graduates from an idea to a project to actually a launch in market. That's what I was doing, and I was director of the Stretch Innovation team before I left Coty.
That's really impressive. And I like that you talked about management and their buy-in, because that's a question that we have is there's a lot of talk about consumer-centric approaches, but they're not always that easy to implement, especially in large companies. So how do you manage to get buy-in from internal stakeholders, from management, to be able to lead such an approach?
It's very funny because, people think you can fix everything with money. Mm-hmm. And what is very funny is the problem they have is they have too much money. That's a great problem to have, but not when it comes to innovation. 2 things that are critical in innovation. The first one is what we call the scarcity mindset. And how do you make sure that you drive your priority to what is actually relevant for both your business and your consumer? When you have too much money, you can't make that choice. You want to have everything. Instead of building, your bicycle, you built a bicycle with extra lighting and superpowers, etc. But the person wants actually to go from A to B a little bit faster. You don't need to build a Rolls Royce, just build them a bicycle. Having too much money is a problem. And the reason why large companies start to give too much money is that they don't accept failure. They don't realize that failure is a mode of learning, is a mode of experimenting. Actually, I don't see failure as something negative when you develop a product. Failure is just one of the 2 outcomes. One is positive, one is a negative outcome. Yet, both of them help you learn on your plan of experiment to develop an innovation. So scarcity is fantastic because you focus on what's top priority as opposed to faffing around with so many other things. And the way we were doing this, at least in my structure, I did not tell my team how much budget we had for the year. I was making them break their project into smaller milestones, and they had to pitch me and the rest of what we call the board of advisors within the company, each of their projects, and we would unlock their small pockets of budget to make sure that it was very clear how that money would be used, what would be the expected experience and learning, and what would be the outcome, whether it would be positive or negative. At least it will have to be a level of learning to graduate to the next milestone. And we were virtually constraining the team to actually reduce the available pocket of money, even though we had, millions to spend, for example.
That's really interesting. So you're artificially creating scarce conditions.
I didn't know that until later in the year when I was working on budget and I was telling them how much we had till the end of the year. And they were like, well, why don't we do all of the other things? And one of the answers to one of them especially was like, well, you wouldn't have created so many creative ways of testing that product if you had so much money. So at the end, we just kept that in mind on how to use that. Money scarcity is one thing. The second one, which is not given for everyone, and that's where the no BS attitude comes into play, and the kind of being able to speak several languages, is the corporate politics. For me, that's what is killing an organization, because the people actually driving the decision-making process, the budget holder, are not the one who are actually talking to the consumers. So you look at the trends, you look at the market, you look into your consumers, you listen to those pain points, and you can quantify that need and the business opportunity. But then you pitch that purely to talk about money to a person who has that budget, but doesn't really have that direct line of communications with the consumers. And that politics element could be fixed through two angles. The first one is you expose them through the creation journey without, sucking up all the time. Could that be for one consumer interview? Could that be to recording actually part of the interviews and compiling them into, shorter snippets? But also you need to make sure you speak their language. And their language is often turned into P&L, turned into new market growth opportunity, turned into volume and value share, as opposed to just, this is cool, look at that consumer insight, but turning that into how is this going to be growing the company, as opposed to how is this going to be getting more consumers? Because those two don't always come into place. You can have the best product and get more consumers, but if it's detrimental to the overall financial targets of the company, that is not going to fly. So, and you have to be able to speak those two languages.
We've known each other for a few years now, and I have seen your vocabulary shift from consumer-centricity to human-centricity. Can you explain the difference and why it matters to you?
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why I left the big companies as well, to be frank about this. So I've actually written a small article on LinkedIn. So that's in English what they call a shameless plug. And I wrote that small article because I got pissed off by one of the companies literally just communicating marketing bullshit to people. And basically, I just wrote the article one night. That's one of the reasons why I don't sleep much. And I posted it on LinkedIn. And I basically turned that, after I calmed down, into something which was much more positive and actually enabling, which is there are different ways of doing innovation. One of the ways, which we see still a lot, is what I call the I hope it sticks model. So you build whatever, you have one piece of insight, you build something, you put it in market, and you hope that it's going to stick. And this is done, frankly, most of the time when you want to do a technological push, or when it's something that you believe in, but you haven't checked with enough people to understand whether there is enough appeal. So yes, it fixes your needs, but then when you put it in market, you're the only one seeing that, as opposed to a chunk of people or size of the community. The second model is the one that we talked earlier, which is really the consumer-centric. And I won't spend time on it because there's so much good literature in that space and so many good people doing that. I think that's a model that is still valid, but I think this is starting to become obsolete now and for the years to come. The principle of consumer-centric, which is all about the empathy and the listening, it's right, but I think it's not forward-thinking enough for what we're starting to see now. When I started talking about humanity-centric, which I'm going to be touching on now, I think it was probably before COVID or along those lines, and we didn't have all those things that kicked in the world. But what we're seeing is humanity-centric model has been driven actually by all generations. Everyone is talking about Gen Z, but reality is, yes, proportionally more Gen Zs are in the human-centric mode, and I'll give you a couple of examples. But it's also based on their mindset. Millennials, I'm a Gen Y, so I'll be in that pocket as well to some extent. Not all Gen Ys think this way because they've been building a habit of individualism over the past decades, but some of them still open enough to look into that, but also to some extent some of the Gen X. The way it works is individuals are nested into much broader webs. Decision making is not now just done by individuals. And one of the reasons is that everything is visible. Everything you do is being judged by people. Everything you do is being posted online. And you get your personal drivers, but you also get external pressure coming into play. And one of the examples to work, actually, we did a piece of research on reinventing fragrance in Asia because the volumes are going fast, but we couldn't correlate a product being designed and actually what is being performing and selling in market. And one of the examples was in Taiwan. We had a person going and we did a shop along in Taiwan in one of the stores, and she was very attracted by a Marc Jacobs fragrance. All well and good. And we were like, oh, great. So the proposition makes sense, resonates with the regions, etc. She bought a dual fragrance, and that dual fragrance was beautiful, looked pink, etc. Once we did a debrief with that person, it was very simple. Two things happened. The first one is there was a massive brand awareness and brand recognitions of Dior versus Marc Jacobs, and I think it was Marc Jacobs Daisy. And therefore, that recognition and peer support or peer approval was very important to that person. But the second thing as well is when people go shopping more and more, it starts to become a group activity, at least in that region. And therefore, it's not just you making a decision, but it's you deselecting options, converging into a basket of options, and then seeking peer approval, either through messages, you send a picture. And it feels like now purchase is being made as groups as opposed to individual. And that's something that really triggered a thinking on, are we actually now talking to individuals or are we talking to groups? We now start seeing more and more trends coming into play, right? So when you look into sustainability, for example, it's not just an individual decision, it's a group decisions. How we look into patriotism and all the movements around Black Lives Matters and things that we've seen where we messed up big time, we're now starting seeing both concepts and products going into stepping away from individuals to groups. So when we talk about beauty, for example, we used to have that notion of personal spa, but actually while starting more and more, we're talking about global wellness, right? It may be the same product, it may be the same applications, but the way we communicate is much more inclusive, group-centric, as opposed to just speaking about individuals as well. And we see more and more of those. One of the examples I like to take as well is it's much less so about taking you out of your comfort zone, but educating you into more inclusivity and letting other people coming into your groups. I'm not surprised to see, new apps that are just crushing it today, like Clubhouse, which is this new audio-based social network. Paul is working on Invite. You go into a brand new social network. It's not just you going into a massive platform where you may know nobody, but you actually go into a platform where you actually have some friends at the party. And that model by itself, I think, is very smart because that's what people are starting to look for as well.
Based on all that you just described and everything that you're experiencing, what are the insights that led you to launch NOLEO? Actually, you did NOLEO. And how do you ensure that NOLEO, it's a young startup, remains very human-centric?
Good question. So actually, my very good friend, so I joined Nico as he was basically struggling to find clean product. He was expecting his first daughter, basically. Just to set the context, the guy is a bank making great money, so he could buy whatever types of product he wants. You had organic milk, actually, that was costing 4 times more than normal milk, which is crazy. You can't afford that lifestyle and you can't afford those products, yet, despite this, he couldn't find truly clean product for his daughters. The funny thing is the amount of attention or the amount of work that you spend looking for clean products for your babies as opposed to for yourself is multiplied by 10. Being a chemist, once you start looking into the ingredient list and the labels at the back, then you realize, oh shit, okay, so I'm going to do a bit of research on my ingredient. And this is a person being a chemist. The bigger problem was, if you're not a chemist, how does that work? You basically trust whatever you see. And if you see making something of phenoxyethanol on all the products, you start seeing that it's normal. However, when you do a little bit of research and look at some of those papers, it's either there's a problem with some of those ingredients or there's a question mark around some of those ingredients. The big problem that we have there is once there is a question mark, no one can tell you if it's a good thing or if it's a bad thing. And therefore, sort of lobbying that is happening is there's no proof that is wrong, therefore it's good. For us was a statement that was a big problem. And that's really what triggered us to actually, again, being with this no BS attitude to be, look, either you know it's safe and you have proof that it's safe. And if you don't have proof that it's safe or you have a question mark, then it shouldn't be actually a question whether you should have it or not. You should not have it, full stop. There's so many different options to make a product clean. It's not normal to compromise and have question marks into your ingredient. What's happening in the overall personal care, a lot of products have done some great things. And again, I'm talking about the US specifically because that's where the brand is being launched. You had brands like Native and Schmidt Naturals, for example, after all that fiasco of aluminum into deodorants. And actually, we've seen years later, Respire doing something similar in France. We've seen that with, I think it was Hello or with Tums of Maine for toothpaste. And actually, there was nothing done in baby care. The gold standard today in diaper change are wipes. The cleanest ones are water wipes. And the big problem we have is actually to change and clean the diaper area, you actually need 3 products. So everyone is shifting and looking into wipes, but you have 3 babies out of 4 that have what we call diaper rash, the redness in the bum area. So now babies or parents are starting to use not just wipes, and water wipes may be clean, but not really biodegradables, but then you have to use a body lotion. and you have to use a diaper rash cream. And actually, people tend to forget that, look, you shouldn't also have to use 3 products. You should be using just 1 product. You shouldn't have to multiply the number of ingredients you use. And when we looked into what was happening, there was nothing in the US, but we had this product called liniment based off, calcium or lime water and olive oil that was working very well in France. And as we were discussing this with Nico, wanted to have a product just for his daughter. If there's a massive avenue in the US, if there's a massive problem with wipes, let's just see what we can do. And you can either contribute to a change or you can actually lead the change. And that's what we wanted to do. And after doing a small test with 500 products, we realized there was a massive need, a massive frustration from people who were shopping the cleaner option because those were the only options available. If they could buy something better, they would, but there was nothing better. And that's why we decided to launch that, mainly from the frustrations of the people, but also the reviews that we were reading from people. So every Monday, we spend time with Nico to read every single reviews, analyze them. And when you see that stuff like, your product is made of miracles, you saved my life, and things like that, if it was just, your product is nice, we wouldn't have launched it. But seeing how much we were just literally saving people's lives, or not literally, but figuratively saving people's lives, that's why we decided to go all in that space.
And so staying in touch with the human centricity is, for example, we just described sitting every Monday to read reviews and to stay as close as possible to what people are actually
we do 3 things that are very different and that large companies don't really do. So the first one is we heavily data driven, and by data is consumer data. It could be emails they receive, it could be purchase pattern, it could be group discussions. We do a lot on social media. So actually, you guys do a lot of stuff on social listening. I remember one of the presentation that was given a couple of months ago when you look into, stories and what was declared and things like that. We do that at our level. I think in the future, once we can afford, we'll probably get your tool because that will automate a lot of the stuff that we do. But we do a lot of the insight analysis from what consumers are saying. The second thing that we do is we integrate as part of our entire consumer journey ways to re-engage and ask questions to consumers. So you get your product. Of course, we send you a questionnaire for feedback, not just to have 5 stars, but it's actually to understand a bit better what you like, but also what you don't like. And we're very transparent about that. We're not perfect. We're small companies, but anything that you guys bring, we'll introduce to make a better product. People wanted the larger bottle, we created a larger bottle. People wanted to have a travel kit for travels. Well, now we can't travel much, but we still put that in place. The third thing that we do, we actually talk directly to consumers. And that's something that is very different versus big companies. We don't have those multiple layers, but it's literally Nico and I, as much as possible. Now we're hiring someone to help us because the volumes are going too big, but we talk directly to consumers. We don't just send them an email. We actually send them text messages. Opening rate text message, 98%. Wow. Opening rate of an email, 3%. And we have those live discussions with people in a way that is friendly, no BS, no corporate cleaning or screening. And we're just being very true to people. If people like us, actually they end up loving us. And if people don't like us, then maybe they shouldn't be our consumers whatsoever. So we're just as well super transparent with that. The last thing that we do is, and we haven't figured out yet, we wanted to do a podcast, but seeing how much work it is, we probably won't do it. We are thinking of doing a club on this platform I was telling earlier, Clubhouse. The reason why we haven't launched it is we don't really want to brand it NOLEO. We almost want to create that space of trust and support where you have rooms about people sharing the experience through parenting or bringing some expert interview on some of the specific aspects such as breastfeeding with some lactation specialists and sleep consultant, etc. When we go into connections, so communications and human centricity or humanity-centric approach, that's where the groups and collective discussions are where we're pushing into starting from April onwards, actually.
That's so inspiring. It's pretty clear how human centricity plays a key role in designing new products, but you also shared how useful it could be in understanding the actual use of products by consumers, how useful it could be in identifying new targets or new uses for existing products. I remember that we had a discussion a few months ago.
Yes, we have actually more examples now. The most creative people are our users. I thought I was creative. I'm nothing. versus a mom who hasn't slept for several days, right? The level of creativity that we get in that space, incredible. So our product is an oil-based product. I'm going to be a little bit graphic here, but oil-based products are the best to clean a poopy diaper as opposed to just like a water wipe. What's interesting, we're starting to see in some of the social network on TikTok, actually, and also some on Instagram, what we've seen as the NOLEO hacks. And NOLEO hacks as how can you use that one product that does everything, so 3-in-1, to become a 4, 5, or a 6-in-1. And we're having a couple of moms that used it because they were so tired after changing the diapers before going to bed, and they couldn't be bothered going upstairs to use their makeup remover to remove their makeup. They're starting to use our product to remove makeup. And what was very funny is the analogy is, look, if we can clean a messy diaper, it can surely clean my messy face when I don't want to go upstairs and get my product. So to the point where we're now starting to think how we could just twist the formula, if we need to, make it suitable for makeup remover. And there's other products as well we've discovered through listening to people and looking at stories, and I can't share just yet. But the other example that we had was you usually buy one bottle of product for one bag of cotton pads. So some people use washable cotton wipes, but in the US, the washable cloth is not so developed versus France, and people use disposable cotton pads. And that was a large size and organic, etc. So usually you would buy one bottle of product for one bag of cotton. And when we're looking at the sales, we were selling one bottle of product and 4 bags of cottons. Either they are very messy diapers that require more cotton pads, or there's something wrong with that. So what we started to do is we started to collect feedbacks through the sales on literally questioning, what are you using this for and why do you like our product? And what we realized is there's been a famous makeup artist in Hollywood who used that on set to remove heavy makeup on people's face, and they used our cotton pads. That community being so tight, and again, we're back to the community-centric or humanity-centric as opposed to individual-centric, the virality of that post she made using that cotton pad went into the professional makeup artist community in California, and that's what actually triggered for us a brand new vertical of products, stepping away from moms for whom we designed the cotton pads for, into a brand new vertical of people that love our product even more, which were the makeup artists. Now we have 2 main targets for these cotton pads, who are the moms, of course, but also the makeup artists. And who knows, we may have other types of people that may like those types of products. Being open-minded and not just focused on your specific customers will help you actually find new opportunities for your product to different types of targets.
Despite what you said, Luca, you are a very creative person. And so what we were wondering to wrap up this conversation is where you find inspiration.
I listed 5 tips. So again, maybe those could be useful. The first one is I give a lot when I talk. And there is this psychologist, Idris Abekan, who's written Libérez votre cerveau, or Free Your Mind. And he's talked about the economy of knowledge, right? And this is brilliant because I can say something right now that will give value to someone else. So I'm giving away something, someone will learn and grow into that space, and they will gain value. Yet everything I've said, I haven't lost it. I keep the same level of value and knowledge, and you get more knowledge. So it's double positive. I like to talk a lot about things where I can add value, because that's something that could be inspiring and helpful and is not going to be detrimental to me. And the way I do it as well is I can speak different languages. And by different languages, I don't mean I'm speaking of French and English and German or whatever. I also speak different style of languages. I could speak very refined and mingle into those kind of, high management types of conversation. I can be more mainstream and approachable, and I can vulgarize complex concepts. I can speak whatever streets if I need to, based on some of the product and things we're approaching. For example, makeup artist in LA is a very different crowd versus a makeup artist in Printemps or Galeries Lafayette. So sharing, oversharing, and being humble about what you know and what you don't know, it's my first tip. The second tip, listen a lot, because you get, through voice, a lot of emotions. It's good to read, but it's also good to listen on things where people can actually express their emotion. And when I start seeing a pocket of information where people are uncomfortable in whatever they're saying, I actually press on that point a bit harder to try to release, a bit like a massage, and actually create that meaningful piece of insights that you may not just get through just reading whatever declared element. The third tip is I do innovation through analogy, and I like looking at different businesses or industries and seeing how those could be translated into beauty, for example. But I've also seen a lot of innovation that happen at the seam. So the concept is simple. If you bring a new piece into an equation, it's like pushing a new piece onto a puzzle. You will break the puzzle and you will create cracks and interfaces. And every time you have cracks between two pieces, that's where you can have pockets of innovation. I'll give you an example. We created, TV shows and reality TV, and people starting to become celebrities, TV celebrities. The new job that happened there is actually managers of TV celebrities or managers of influencers. And actually what you have now is you have a model of influencers being actually a new angle to product marketing. And we see that with industries like, drop shipping and things like that. You have managers of influencers, you have agencies of influencers, and all of those were created simply because social network and reality TV were created. The fourth one is I love listening to youngsters. And by youngsters, I'm taking people that are between 18 and 23. Those guys are hyper smart. They are all entrepreneurs, much more than who we are. They're hyper creative. They don't care if they do something wrong. And actually what I do with this is I allocate roughly 10 hours of my time per month by blocks of 30 minutes every weekend. And actually, I just got another message this morning. Someone had a problem with an idea they had on the cosmetics. And I just say, just look at my calendar. It's up and it's visible. Slot a 30-minute call and we'll be talking about your problem. And I'll see if I can help, but at least I'll listen to your problem and try to connect you with other people. And this brings a lot of aspirational people into my network and gives me additional ideas for that. And the number 5 is, believe it or not, I don't work in the morning. So right now it's 11 a.m. It's still part of my me time, and I wanted to have this discussions with you guys for a long time now. And I use that for personal development, to recharge my batteries, to connect with people, to reconnect with myself as well. I know not everyone can do it, but I think with this new norm and the remote work and things like that, I've just decided in the morning until 12, I don't work and I don't feel bad about it, but actually it gives me extra power and extra boost for the rest of the day, because I usually finish working quite late, and that's a big source of inspiration for me as well.
Well, I think you're a great source of inspiration to anybody who's been listening today. I mean, there's so many nuggets of wisdom in what you shared. Thank you so much. It was very, very interesting. I can't wait to listen to this again.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Sandra. Thank you very much, Audrey.
Warm thanks to Lucas for opening up with such detail and generosity about what he's learned so far innovating across the world and in different businesses. What resonated the most with us is the idea of human-centricity, which runs in our DNA at DinVibe and is the guiding principle for the way we gather and deliver insights from our social media intelligence platforms and tools. We'd love to hear from you. What were your takeaways? What ideas did this conversation spark for you? You can email us at vibrations@dinvibe.com, that's DYNVIBE.com, or send us a note through LinkedIn. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for upcoming episodes. To find out more about DinVibe, head over to dinvibe.com, that's DYNVIBE.com, or check out our LinkedIn page. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it with a friend or a colleague. Another great way to support us is to subscribe on your favorite platform and rate and review the podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with another episode.